We will be moving on to the next part, which is the Audible challenge. We will be listening to a clip from Audible and answering the following questions. So yeah, let's go.
Kittens talk to their special people, too. Misunderstandings often happen, though, because it takes a while for kittens to learn human language and for people to figure out felinese. That's because people rely on verbal communication and mostly pay attention to the sounds their kitten makes. Vocalizations are only one small part of the kitten vocabulary, though. The way things smell and the position of the body also speaks volumes. In fact, people often tell their kittens something without meaning to, simply by the tone of their voice and the way they position their body, or even with certain odors people don't detect. In addition, the human body is a chemical factory that produces all kinds of subtle scents that people rarely, if ever, notice. But these odors send clear messages to our pets because their noses are more sensitive. For example, when a person is startled or frightened, the body pumps out cortisol, a natural hormone, in greater amounts, and that changes the way we smell. That's how dogs and cats often recognize an owner's emotional state, even when we act nonchalant. You can learn to understand a good portion of felinese just by observing your kitten. That will help you understand your kitten better, anticipate his needs, and avoid misunderstandings. This chapter covers some of the more universal aspects of kitten language. You must remember that every kitten develops his own individual communication quirks, similarly to the way people from around the world talk with accents or other languages, or use different words to describe the same object. As you live with your kitten and pay attention to his voice and body language, you'll become more familiar with what Kitty is trying to tell you. Scent communication. The sense of smell defines life for your kitten. An individual's scent is like a feline name tag that identifies them as friend or foe. Cats use scent information to determine sexual status, to communicate, to interact socially, and to identify territory. Scent is so important that it rules what the kitten eats. If he doesn't like the smell of his food, he won't eat it. To offer some perspective, people have about 5 to 20 million scent-analyzing cells lining their nose. Your kitten has about 67 million. The king of scenting pets, the bloodhound, has 300 million. Now, we don't have the sensory ability to truly understand the intricacies of the kitten's scent language. What we can do, though, is recognize and understand the kitten behaviors that are prompted by scent. Marking behavior is one of the most obvious. Paws that claw. Kittens have scent glands between their toes in the pads of their feet. When they scratch an object, that not only creates visible marks, it also leaves behind their personal scent. Not only that, but just going through the motions of scratching has meaning. When cats want to signal ownership, they pointedly scratch objects in the presence of another cat or dog that they want to impress. Paw marking behavior doesn't rely on claws either. Kittens that have been declawed will continue to go through the motions the rest of their life. The scented marks help establish territorial boundaries for Kitty. He'll often claw or paw to leave his scent near doorways, his litter box, sleeping areas, any real estate that has particular importance to him. Basically, the scent posts a flag for other cats, letting them know that this property is occupied and owned by another kitty. Please remember that clawing is normal behavior for kittens and cats. It not only feels good, it serves as a communication tool for the cat. It is impossible to prevent your kitten from scratching. The best way to deal with kitten claws is to offer your new pet a legal claw target so he'll leave your valuables alone.
All right, that was the audio clip from Audible. And the questions are, the book is talking about A, cats, B, dogs, C, cows. Second question is, vocalization is just a part of Kitten language. It's a yes or no question. And then the third question is, the position of the body and tail is also a part of the Kitten language. This is also a yes or no question. We'll see what the audience thinks before moving on to our instructors. And the results are in. Cats win by 86%. Yes win for the second question by 79%. And then yes also wins for the third question by 71%. Let's go to our instructors.
The first question is correct. The book was talking about cats. Vocalization, it did also mention that vocalization is just part of Kitten language. And it, on number 3, it does also say that the position of the body and the tail is also a part of the Kitten language. So I'd agree with the majority on all 3.
What are some other responses?
I agree with the audience as well. It does. The book was about cats, specifically about kittens. And yes, number 2, the vocalization is just part of a Kitten language. And I agree with number 3 as well. The body and tail are also part of the Kitten language. I have cats, so I was familiar with all these even before I saw that, but still, everyone was right on.
I do agree with the majority as well for all 3 questions.
Yes, I also agree. Also, the first question, the book was named Complete Kitten Care. Yes, so obviously the book was talking about cats. And also I agree on questions 2 and 3.
I also do agree with our instructors. And for the third question, I agree with Dr. Chris. So I also do have, without even listening, I do understand, I do know the answer for the third question. So, yeah.
Asma?
I agree with all. The 3 questions are correct.
I see we have a lot of cat owners with us, so you guys are kind of biased here. So yeah, but this was very beneficial for pet owners in general. Yeah, I guess we can move on to the next part, and I believe it is the Toefl part. And again, we will be listening to an audio clip and answering the following questions. So yeah.
Listen to part of a lecture in a biology class. So, continuing our discussions of environmental adaptation, today I want to focus on a species of fish called the notothenioids. Bit of a mouthful, I know. Scientists have documented over 90 species of notothenioids in both deep and shallow waters. If you're getting creeped out by the PowerPoint slide, don't worry. They really only live around Antarctica. Most of them are pretty small. However, a few species can weigh up to 150 kilograms. These fish can be identified by their huge eyes, insulated with a layer of thick, transparent protective tissue. This kind of tissue protects the fluid in their eyeballs from freezing in the incredibly cold seawater. Remember, salt water has a lower freezing point than fresh water, so moisture in an animal's tissue would be particularly vulnerable to freezing and causing cell death. So while the cold ocean of Antarctica could freeze and kill most fish, the notothenioids end up thriving in these icy waters. They actually make up nearly 95% of all fish species in the Southern Ocean around that cold continent. That kind of thing is a stark contrast to tropical oceans where the biodiversity is extremely high. When you think of a tropical reef, for instance, you probably imagine a plethora of different types of fish and sea creatures living together and preying on each other. The average coral reef supports over 4,000 types of fish, sponges, crustaceans, and others. To have one species of fish in an entire section of the ocean? Pretty impressive. Yes, Amy?
How or when did the notothenioids end up taking over the Southern Ocean?
Well, I'm glad you asked. That was actually my next point of interest. So, about 30 million years ago, the water in that area was a lot warmer than it is today. Way back then, South America and Antarctica were actually connected. the air from around the equator could travel south to heat up the chilly Antarctic waters. The warm tropical waters could also flow southwards, bringing the rich biodiversity along with it. Because Antarctica's waters were relatively warm back then, it could support a lot of different types of animals. We confirmed this by looking at the fossil record, even finding out that 90 or so of the notothenioids even existed back then. Historians think that somewhere between 5 and 14 million years ago, two huge changes occurred. First of all, a chance mutation allowed the notothenioids to develop a special protein that now flows through their body. This special protein is actually a type of antifreeze. It works by bonding to an ice crystal that formed inside their flesh, preventing it from growing any larger. So, at the time, the waters they swam in were still decently warm, and the protein didn't do much for their overall survival rates. Still, somewhere around this time period, there are records of a colossal shift that moved around the Earth's tectonic plates. This movement is now known as continental drift. It pushed Antarctica away from South America and down toward the chilly southern end of the Earth. This caused a current to swirl up and form, encircling the cooling continent with a rush of cold water. This cold water prevented warmer tides from intermingling. It eventually dropped to the sub-zero icy landscape we know today. As you may have guessed, the tropical fish didn't do so well in the sudden drop of environmental temperatures, and many species went extinct. Luckily for the notothenioids, they had a handy-dandy gene mutation that let them produce this antifreeze protein. Now the only type of fish that could survive the cold waters, it had virtually no competition for food or resources and went wild. So, as its population increased dramatically, they migrated into different parts of oceans. Over time, they developed different physical adaptations to survive in their particular environment. Eventually, they split off into subspecies, mutated a bit more, had a bit of geologic morphology going on. Very cool stuff. We call this kind of physical differentiation process of adaptive radiation. It really only happens when a species rapidly changes and ends up with quite a few new species to fill empty niches that either didn't exist before or weren't available. So now we have about 90 species of notothenioids kicking it in the Southern Ocean.
All right, so that was the audio clip, and we'll move on to the questions. So the first question is, the audio clip is talking about a special type of fish. It is a yes or no question. The second question is, this lecture is a part of a ... class. A, geography, B, history, C, all choices are wrong. And the results are in. For the first question, yes wins by 75%. And for the second question, C wins by 69%. So yeah, let's go to our instructors.
Yes, I agree with the choices. It was talking about, I wish I could pronounce it again, notophytioids. I don't know, that was a hard one. And then he did mention at the beginning that this was part of a biology class.
Yes, I'd agree with the majority on both of them because don't know how to pronounce the first one, and it was a biology class in the beginning. So
I agree with the majority because it's mentioned in the beginning it was a biology class, and yeah, the video was the clip was talking about a specific type of fish.
I too agree with the audience because, as was just mentioned, it was part of a biology class. They mentioned that at the beginning, and then yes, it's about a specific type of fish. I can't pronounce the name either. I don't remember.
Yes, I also agree on the first question, since they said they can withstand and adapt in low temperature environments, mainly fizzy waters. So yes. And also I agree on the second question, it was a biology class.
Salma?
Yes, I do agree on both of the questions as well.
Okay, it's not unmuting. I guess we can move on. We are all agreeing on this. And yeah, let's go to the second audio clip from Toefl. And yeah, let's go.
Listen to a conversation between a student and a professor.
Excuse me, Professor Thompson. I know your office hours are tomorrow, but I was wondering if you had a few minutes free now to discuss something.
Sure, John. What did you want to talk about?
Well, I have some quick questions about how to write up the research project I did this semester about climate variations.
Oh, yes. You were looking at variations in climate in the Grant City area, right? How far along have you gotten?
I've got all my data, so I'm starting to summarize it now, preparing graphs and stuff. But I'm looking at it and I'm afraid that it's not enough. But I'm not sure what else to put in the report.
I hear the same thing from every student. You know, you have to remember now that you're the expert on what you've done. So think about what you'd need to include if you were going to explain your research project to someone with general or casual knowledge about the subject, like your parents. That's usually my rule of thumb. Would my parents understand this?
Okay, I get it.
I hope you can recognize by my saying that how much you do know about the subject.
Right, I understand. I was wondering if I should also include the notes from the research journal you suggested I keep.
Yes, definitely. You should use them to indicate what your evolution and thought was through time. So just set up, what was the purpose of what you were doing, to try to understand the climate variability of this area, and what you did and what your approach was.
Okay, so for example, I studied meteorological records. I looked at climate charts. I used different methods for analyzing the data, like certain statistical tests, and then I discussed the results. Is that what you mean?
Yes, that's right. You should include all of that. The statistical tests are especially important. And also, be sure you include a good reference section where all your published and unpublished data came from, because you have a lot of unpublished climate data.
Something just came into my mind and went out the other side.
That happens to me a lot, so I've come up with a pretty good memory management tool. I carry a little pad with me all the time and jot down questions or ideas that I don't want to forget. For example, I went to the doctor with my daughter and her baby son last week, and we knew we wouldn't remember everything we wanted to ask the doctor, so we actually made a list of 5 things we wanted answers to.
A notepad is a good idea. Since I'm so busy now at the end of the semester, I'm getting pretty forgetful these days. Okay, I just remembered what I was trying to say before.
Good. I was hoping you'd come up with it.
Yes, it ends up that I have data on more than just the immediate Grant City area, so I also included some regional data in the report. With everything else, it should be a pretty good indicator of the climate in this part of the state.
Sounds good. I'd be happy to look over a draft version before you hand in the final copy if you wish.
Great. I'll plan to get you a draft of the paper by next Friday. Thanks very much. Well, see ya.
Okay.
All right, so the questions for this part are, first question is, the student family name is Thompson. It's a yes or no question. And then the second question is, the student already completed his research project report writing. It's also a yes or no question. Let's see what the audience thinks first before moving on to our instructors. Okay, so for the first question, no wins by 67%. And for the second question, no also wins by 80%. And yeah, let's go to our instructors and maybe we can start with Rahima.
Thank you, Shahad. I'm sorry for a technical problem. I'm sorry. I
No,
didn't
it's
know
okay.
what happened. The first question, because I was fixing my problem, I couldn't hear the guy's family name, surname, so I'm sorry for that. I think I'm going to believe our audience. And the second question, he was still looking for some stuff to add his project. So I think that he didn't finish. So I agree with audience. Thank you.
I would say that the student's name was John and the professor was Thompson. And yes, he was still trying to add some data to his research project.
Yeah, I'd agree with the majority on both of them.
Yes, I also agree that the student's family name may be John, and the student for the second question, he said that he will be handing his first draft next Friday. So yes, I agree that it's no.
I agree as well with the both answers.
Yes, I agree with the audience as well. The professor's name was Thompson, and for number 2, he was just starting his research project.
Yes, I do agree as well, because the student's name was John and the professor's last name was Thompson, and his research wasn't completed yet.
Sounds great.